Ladies and gentlemen, by my very nerdy watch, it is 5 o'clock sharp. And I know this is a really tricky thing to come on the week of Christmas break and after a school day to come and have to do one more meeting. So I'd like to be able to get started right off the bat. We may have some others trickling in. Thank you so much for your interest. Thanks so much for being here. We actually did, because the Westlake facility is actually going to be the place for the secondary STEM school, we did this already with the Westlake staff as well. So we weren't expecting any from that, at least that school. And with the holiday, we're really looking to get a lot of this information right out via our webcast. We kind of figured that would be the way to go. So thank you for being our live audience. This is like our studio audience here. So you can laugh at the right times and applaud at the right times, just like the laugh track. It will really help the video out, if that's okay. And signs and everything. You do the whole 9 yard. My voice is coming back to me this week, but it's been all but gone over the last few days, so I'm going to project the very best I can. I'd hook up the normal other mics, but actually the mic I'm wearing is feeding into the camera, so we're not going to switch that out. If you're not hearing me well enough, come a little closer or just tell me to belt it out a little bit more. If you don't know me, my name is Tyler Howe. I'm the new principal for the Westlake STEM School that opens next school year. I'm actually just coming from the elementary STEM school that was opened about 3 years ago, Armstrong. And before that, I've been at a few other locations in Granite School District. I'm really excited about this project. I'm very excited to have had the chance to work with the staff and a group of students towards a STEM approach to the curriculum, and we're very excited to watch that expand on to a few more grades in a 7th and 8th grade fashion. Having come late at night, I wish I could say you were right off the hook, but we're going to start right off the bat by giving you the tiniest of assignments. And I want you to watch very carefully the video up here. And I'm not going to tell you what you're watching for. I just want you to watch it and take it all in. That's it. Good movie, huh? It's not Star Wars, but it's a good movie. I want you to think about this for just a second. This is somewhat of a contest. My question to you is actually the one that's going to be right up here on the screen in a moment. How long will it take to print all of those pages? That's the million-dollar question right now. I'm not giving you anything else right now, but I do want to incentivize it just slightly. And this is even better than what we offered last night when we actually did this. For the person who gets the closest, we have a fun-size pack of M&Ms, a code sticker, and I even have a parking validation for the Granite Education Center, okay? All to the person who comes the very closest to getting the right answer. Just going to take about 3 minutes. This isn't the most ideal of settings for this kind of thing, so don't hesitate to turn to anyone who's close to you. That's collaborative. That's not cheating. Bounce ideas back and forth, but your question right up here is, how long will it take to print all those pages? Good luck. 2 minutes. We'll give you 2 minutes to get started with your first guess. Make sure you get it written down on a little piece of paper, and I brought paper for anyone who needs any. If you need an extra piece of paper or something. That's a good question. All right, even if you aren't quite concrete about this, I want you really quickly make sure you get at least an answer written down somewhere. It's really hard. There's little pieces of paper I put all over the place for you. It's really hard for us to be convinced you were the closest if you just tell us at the end. That's what I was thinking. So we don't want that to be the way we roll here. Up on the screen, I'm just going to put up here a few general questions of how this conversation would go. What do you think right now? First off, before we have any more of a conversation, what do you think? How long is it going to take to print all those papers? What's your thoughts?
8 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thinking 8 minutes, 20 seconds. Thumbs up if you were higher than that. Thumbs down if you were thinking lower than that. Oh, they think you're a little high. Price is right. You may have overbid, man. Other thoughts? What are the guesses we have? John Paul?
20 seconds.
Say it again.
3 minutes, 20 seconds.
3 minutes, 20 seconds. Higher or lower? Most of you are lower. John Paul, what'd you think?
2 minutes, 51 and 1/2 seconds.
Wow, that is precision if I've ever heard it. So 2 minutes. Anyone lower than 2 minutes, area? You guys were lower?
20.
Minute 20?
minute 20.
Really?
I said a minute 40.
Okay. I missed your name. What's your name?
I'm Bob.
Bob was saying something right at the beginning of this. He said,
How many sheets of paper?
did any of you wonder that?
Yes.
Did you want to know that?
Yes.
Anything else you would have liked to have known about this?
How long did it take to make each second?
How long it seemed to take?
How many times?
Total of pages.
Total of pages.
How many times the printer's going to jam?
How many times the printer's going to jam? That wouldn't happen at all.
Does that count if it runs out of ink and they're still coming?
If it runs out of ink, things like that. I like your thinking. That's exactly what I put up here on our next one if it comes. There it comes. The kind of information you'd like to solve. We set a timer. Let's see what it looks like. Watch carefully. Same thing. What do you think? Does that change your thinking? Okay.
No, because the first one takes longer.
Another question I heard Bob brought this one up. How many pages?
Probably 50.
That's the last sheet.
Most printers don't hold that.
All right, we'll give you another 90 seconds. Make your tweaks here, okay? That was the information you were asking for. All righty, let's hear some of the guesses. And you've got them written down. Bob, what'd you put?
5 minutes, 4 seconds.
So you went way down from your other guess. Mr. Maddox, what'd you get?
4 minutes and 53 seconds.
4 minutes,
That was my
53?
exact answer.
Exact answer, were you cheating? Were you copying off him? No, mathematically, that's what you came up with.
Really sound, I have.
Yeah, I've got
In here?
5 minutes even.
5 minutes even?
I did 4 minutes to 23
Apparently
seconds.
math isn't my thing.
4 minutes what?
23 and 1/4 seconds.
Sure glad you're being precise.
Teaching irrational numbers.
3?
Yeah, but is that using significant?
5 minutes, 13? Same? Did you write down a number?
4 minutes, 57 seconds.
Not bad. All right, you ready?
Yeah, let's see it. Run it.
Uh-huh.
Do we need to wait?
Yeah, we're going to watch the whole thing now. Isn't that great?
Nice.
Here we go. Bring it on.
Here we go.
Oh, 17.
423 1/4.
I hope that quarter throws you off. 4:23 1/4, so he is 6 1/4 seconds off. Was someone closer? Yours was in the 4s, right?
5.
Oh, 5s. Maybe it was yours.
We were both in the 4s, but he's closer.
Give him a big round of applause, everybody, for winning. Okay, there really is no parking validation at the Grand Education Center because it's all free.
The parking validation.
The parking validation was actually just my card, so you can have that too. There you go. You go give that to anybody you find in the parking lot, and they'll give you free parking. I swear. Now, as we have that conversation, it's a fun activity, a fun game to be able to think through, but let's think of some of the actual learning objectives that this might be tackling. What standards or math objectives did we actually touch on? There's quite a few.
Multiplication.
There's some multiplication, estimating,
Transfer from full number divided by seconds. So it's multiple orders of conversions.
okay. Others, rates, we got rate in here, right? Ratios, okay.
Rational numbers.
Rational numbers. There's many things that were touched upon, and the big question I want us to ponder right now, we're going to watch a little video clip that talks about this kind of an activity, but the big question I'd like you to be pondering on this is, why teach in this way? What would be the advantage of having your classroom discussions centered around this kind of thinking, this kind of strategizing? This next video is Dan Meyer. I hope you've been able to hear some of what he's ever shared. If not, Google him and watch a few things along these lines, because it's extremely worthwhile to be able to get at least a take on why it might be an advantageous thing to have a little bit of a subtle shift in what we do in our classroom instruction, or at least in what a lot of classroom instruction has been. Here's Dan Meyer.
Can I ask you to
So please recall a time when you really loved something, a movie, an album, a song, or a book, and you recommended it wholeheartedly to someone you also really liked. And you anticipated that reaction, you waited for it, and it came back, and the person hated it. So by way of introduction, that is the exact same state in which I spend every working day of the last 6 years. I teach high school math. I sell a product to a market that doesn't want it, but is forced by law to buy it. I mean, it's just a losing proposition. So there's a useful stereotype about students that I see, a useful stereotype about you all. I could give you guys Algebra 2 final exam, and I'd expect no higher than a 25% pass rate. And both of these facts say less about you or my students than they do about what we call math education in the US. Here's an example from a physics textbook. It applies equally to math. Notice, first of all, here that you have exactly 3 pieces of information there, each of which will figure into a formula somewhere eventually, which the student will then compute. Okay? I believe in real life. And ask yourselves, what problem have you solved ever that was worth solving where you knew all of the given information in advance, where you didn't have a surplus of information and you had to filter it out, or you didn't have insufficient information and had to go find some? I'm sure we all agree that no problem we're solving is like that. And the textbook, I think, knows how it's hamstringing students, because watch this. This is the practice problem set. When it comes time to the actual problem set, you have problems like this right here, where we're just swapping out numbers and tweaking the context a little bit. And if the student still doesn't recognize the stamp this was molded from, it helpfully explains to you like what sample problem you can return to find the formula. Like you could literally, I mean this, pass this particular unit without knowing any physics, just knowing how to decode a textbook. That's a shame. And I'll yield the floor here for a second to Einstein, who I believe has paid his dues. He talked about the formulation of a problem being so incredibly important. And yet, in my practice, in the US here, we just give problems to students. We don't involve them in the formulation of the problem. So 90% of what I do with my 5 hours of prep time per week is to take fairly compelling elements of problems like this from my textbook and rebuild them in a way that supports math reasoning and patient problem solving. And here's how it works. I like this question. It's about a water tank. The question is, how long will it take you to fill it up, okay? First things first, we eliminate all the sub-steps. Students have to develop those. They have to formulate those. And then notice that all the information written on there is stuff you'll need. None of it's a distractor, so we lose that. Students need to decide, all right, well, does the height matter? Does the side length matter? Does the color of the valve matter? What matters here? It's such an underrepresented question in math curriculum. So now we have a water tank. How long will it take you to fill it up? And that's it. And because this is the 21st century, and we would love to talk about the real world on its own terms, not in terms of line art or clip art that you so often see in textbooks, we go out and we take a picture of it. So now we have the real deal. How long will it take it to fill it up? And then even better is we take a video of someone filling it up. And it's filling up slowly, agonizingly slowly. It's tedious. Students are looking at their watches, rolling their eyes, and they're all wondering at some point or another, man, how long is it going to take to fill up? That's how you know you've baited the hook, right? And that question off this right here is really fun for me, because like the intro, I teach kids, because of my inexperience, I teach the kids that are the most remedial, all right? And I got kids who will not join a conversation about math because there's, like, someone else has the formula. Someone else knows how to work the formula better than me, so I won't talk about it. But here, every student is on the level playing field of intuition. Like, everyone's filled something up with water before. So I get kids answering the question, how long will it take? I got kids who are mathematically and conversationally intimidated joining the conversation. We put names on the board, attach them to guesses, and kids have bought in here. And then we follow the process I've described. And the best part here, or one of the better parts, is that we don't get our answer from the answer key in the back of the teacher's edition. We instead just watch the end of the movie. And that's terrifying, all right? Because the theoretical models that always work out in the answer key, the back of the teacher's edition, like that's great, but it's scary to talk about sources of error when the theoretical does not match up with the practical. But those conversations have been so valuable, among the most valuable.
One of my favorite parts of that, and I think he's quoting Einstein on that, is where he talks about the actual formulation of the problem being even more important or equally important in some ways as coming up with the answer. And I do think that it's easy to get away from that. It's easy to start to say, hey, are we getting the answers correct that match up with the back of the book? I always love that Simpsons episode where Bart steals all the teacher editions and they have to shut the whole school down because they don't know how to keep going with it. But I think it's a really, really worthwhile way to look at how are students going through this curriculum. Are they going through in an answer-getting type process, or are they being taught to be critical thinkers and to strategize how to come up with a solution, even if it's not the formulaic or the algorithm way of doing so? We've done a very similar style approach to the curriculum as we've started the elementary STEM school. And I'd like to highlight some of that. Not saying by any means do we feel that what we had started there has completely arrived at what a STEM school should be. We're grappling along the same journey that I'm hoping Westlake's going down and trying things, and some things are going to really work a certain direction. Some might not. We don't pursue those much further. This is a way of going through a curriculum, and we've done a lot with math, but we've tried seeing how this fits in all of our disciplines to have a little more of a student-centered, a guided inquiry approach. We call it the launch, explore, discuss. You'll notice that's exactly what we did with the printer. That's exactly what he was doing with his students with that big thing he was filling up. Launched you into just an interesting question, a worthwhile task. And how many different concepts we touched on and what we chose to grab on and to use skills that we may have acquired in different facets. We may have realized, hey, I need to be able to have this skill and I don't. But that became our own exploration. So launching into a question, exploring different strategies, using the people around you, asking what they're thinking about. Some people use one strategy for it. The next group over might be doing a different one. And then the big key one there, and you could sense it on how his classroom discussions went, that there's that discussion and sharing out the different ideas of what'd you come up with? How come you came up with that? Anyone come up with the same thing? Can you explain their strategy? And those kind of conversations would be just a little bit of a shift of how we might ordinarily do it. I like to even look at it because I think it fits so well with our Grant School District lesson design template. You've seen this, we're familiar with this. But as I look at that, I think, what we're really talking about is this teaching portion right there in the center, as we so often will go through a cycle of, I'm the teacher, I'm going to show you just how to do this. This is the formula, this is the recipe. Now let's do a few of them together. Now take them home and work on them. Often that's kind of the formula that we would go about, and this just shifts it a little bit where, you notice when we were doing the printer, I didn't show you exactly the strategy you needed to use. When you watch Dan Meyer, he didn't just immediately tell all those students, this is how you're going to find the volume of this kind of a shape, but launched them into a question. So if we shift that around just slightly and say, hey, let's see what you come up with, and at the same time as the teacher, being in a very strategic place to be able to watch, hey, this group over here is using this kind of a strategy, and this group over here is using a slightly more complex version. When I get to that discussion stage, I'd sure like to be able to have those ideas come out in the right order and be able to build upon each other. It's exciting. It's certainly not a finished product, but it is a very subtle change in how we might deliver the curriculum. Now let's actually jump into here's actually a few examples of what a launch could look like across different subjects. We just talked about a math one, science one, which items will flow. Social studies, boy, there's so many things that you can consider in social studies or history to be able to look at actual issues that people have grappled with or are currently grappling with. Language arts. This could be a writing prompt, and maybe one not too dissimilar to what you may have already done in a classroom. Should students be required to wear school uniforms? Why or why not? Think of that as a launch and how many different things that students could take from that moment to start exploring, to start researching, to start arguing in a positive way, and having those discussions to become the experts as that classroom discussion continues from there. Those are just some ideas there. I like this example of this. Actually came from some of the Tim's research. I'm forgetting the name of the guy right now. It might come to me as we talk here. Where they actually did you have the name?
No, call him Tim.
Oh.
It's Tim's research.
Tim's, no, I mean TIMMS, okay. Where they looked at student achievement across various countries and different patterns that were going on in classrooms. Looking at a pattern they saw in the United States and Germany. This is a quote from it. Not surprisingly, in the United States and Germany, the focus was skill acquisition, and the typical class proceeded kind of as follows. The teacher instructs students in a concept or skill. It's not popping up there. There it goes. The teacher solves example problems with the class, and then the students practice on their own while the teacher assists individual students. They also compared that with other classrooms in different countries where it was a little bit of a different approach. Interestingly, in other classrooms, one finds a very different script. The class unfolded this way. The teacher poses a complex, thought-provoking problem. Students struggle with the problem. Various students present their ideas or solutions to the class. The class discusses the various solutions and methods. The teacher summarizes the class's conclusions, and the students practice similar problems. You might not think dramatically different, but it sure does shift the burden of who's doing the work. I think we all can look at our own lives and think of how many concepts we learned and how involved we were in that learning. The more we sat and listened, the less, for me at least, it seemed to be a concrete learning experience. The more I was able to be involved in the thinking and the doing, the more I was able to walk away with some knowledge from that. Well, let's talk about a STEM school. Do we know what STEM stands for? Yes. What does it stand for? All together?
Science, technology, engineering.
You're great. And I want to just highlight this quote right here. This, in some ways, summarizes Granite's approach to STEM. It says, a STEM school has its foundation in a project-based approach and nurtures problem-solving and critical thinking skills in students. Students master key concepts by solving authentic problems through methods of their own design or team collaboration and defend the reasons for their methods. There's some of the lines I love there. I think it's so easy when we chant the things like STEM, or we go and see online or visit other schools of what they think STEM is, that it's so easy to think that it means, boy, we're doing a lot of science and math, or we're doing accelerated science and math, or we're extending our science and math. And I think, and this is something at the elementary STEM schools we got that going, we really grappled with. What does it mean? That those things underlined there are an adequate summary of what it does mean. It's really nurturing problem solving and critical thinking with the students. That the students are solving authentic problems through methods of their own design or team collaboration to defend the reasons. I like to think that these fields have certain processes to them where people in the science field, people in the engineering field are very, very accustomed to trying things, having them not work, tweaking them, and then trying them again. That's not something that is completely exclusive to a science, technology, engineering, or math field. I think a lot of the disciplines we teach can and should have a little bit more of that kind of a process to them. Can the students be somewhat scientists, even when they're doing their language arts curriculum, when they're doing their social studies curriculum? And that's where, especially as we look at all these different disciplines and say, hey, where in the STEM acronym is social studies? I remember one of the first phone calls I got right after we started our elementary school was a parent who was so excited. And they were telling me that their child just loves science and math. And this seems like such a perfect fit. But they were very nervous because they also know that their student needed a lot of help with reading. And you're not doing any reading there? Yes, of course. In so many ways, we've had the humorous conversation at Armstrong where he said, isn't it funny to see how much language arts has become the most emphatic thing at our school? Because you have a hard time having the explore, discuss part without a whole lot of communicating, writing, reading back and forth. These kinds of things become so authentic because that's how that process needs to go. So I think that's one of the disclaimers I always like to give as we start to consider STEM. That you bet there's a lot to do with science and math, but it's more the processes from those fields than necessarily those subjects. Let's take a look at Westlake. How many of you have been to Westlake building? Most of you? A few not? Looking forward at this next school year, if you don't know, Westlake currently and next year as well will be a 7th and 8th grade school. So just those 2 grades. Looks like it's frozen on me again. There it goes. This might be a little bit higher, but at least from the boundary study that was just passed at our last board meeting, it was slated that we'd have 775 boundary students. In addition to that, they're already coming in many open enrollment applications. So I'd expect to see that there's the boundary students, which might be more than that, and many others who would be coming on special permit or open enrollment permit. Integrated technology throughout the classrooms. That's something that as a whole, Granite School District I think has done a marvelous job of moving towards being able to have technology as a vehicle of our learning process rather than just an isolated separate event. The school building itself to some extent will be redesigned, or a lot of the furnitures and fixtures to facilitate more of these STEM processes. Kind of like I joked at the beginning of this as we started that activity and said, boy, you're sure not laid out the best way to have these conversations. A lot of just how the building is laid out and the way that environment is structured lends itself to this kind of a process or this kind of discussions. Here's the school building. I've had a chance to walk through it about 3 times with the architects extensively, room by room, and look at the facility. And it's very, very exciting to me. Things like these courtyards here, which sure lend themselves right off the labs for students to be able to have an activity inside and be able to quickly and readily go outside and be able to try that experiment, come back in and make their tweaks, go right back out. Things like that in many areas. Lots of very large space rooms here that could be used in a large group meeting room type structure. Trying to think of other things that jumped out at me as we walked through it. And those of you who've been there, you might know even better than me. The boundary's just a little bit different this next year. You'll see it was in yellow before. We're actually losing just a portion of it that's going actually to Valley, that part down there, so that elementary school all feeds together. Same thing happened with the Redwood Elementary students. They were split before between Granite Park and Westlake, and they'll all be going to Granite Park right now. So the existing, that red line boundary would be the boundary of where the students are going to be coming to us from next year. We've talked about it along the way enough that I'm just going to gloss over these. Some of that STEM school curriculum philosophy. We've already mentioned, devoted to the integration of science, technology, engineering, and math. I'd like to really highlight to the processes from those fields. Students will participate in problem-based cooperative learning projects and will focus on developing the ability to think critically and solve complex problems. And I think that's the huge takeaway, is that we'd be looking at enhancing their ability to strategize, to face a task or a problem that maybe they haven't done before, and not shy away from that, but be invigorated by the idea of, all right, well, what can I do? What strategy can I draw upon to be able to come up with a solution to this? A few more items here. Students will enjoy physical and arts education common to all Granite schools. It'll be more difficult to see when math ends and language arts begins. This is one that's been an interesting goal to be grappling with, even at the elementary ranks, to be able to say, hey, how is it that we can somewhat get an experience for our students where they don't have to turn their math brain off as soon as they're starting their science brain. And as soon as they're done with their science brain, let's make sure we get our language arts brain going, that we can have an experience where the students are able to draw upon multiple different disciplines. It's easier said than done. One of the things we realized very early on is it's quite a challenge to see a high level of integration and be faithful to the essential standards in those disciplines. But the fact that we're looking at that and comparing notes as much as we possibly can is one of the big takeaways, I think, of what a STEM school is about. Teaching will focus on applied learning where content is integrated on a daily basis. Students will engage in designing and creating, kind of like we just said. I like to also contrast what it's not, what a STEM school is not meant to be, at least with the approach we're trying to adopt in Granite School District. It's not meant to be a magnet school for students who are really good in math and science. It's not a school focused on merely ratcheting up math and science time or rigor. It doesn't just mean that we're going to have more math or longer periods of math and longer periods of science, etc. It's also not a school outfitted with technology for the sole purpose of teaching how to use the technology. Teaching in isolation and segregating the curriculum. That's a challenge. It's a challenge in all our schools at all levels. Let's talk just briefly about the application process, and I know how long of a day it's been, and we're going to try to wrap this up as quickly as we can. As you probably noticed, the posting is already up, and it will be up throughout the Christmas break. It'll actually close on the day we get back. So it's definitely give you some time to be able to study some of these things, to be able to mull this over, but you don't want to have so much fun over the entire Christmas break that you forget to apply. It says interviews in January and February. It's more likely the interviews would take place mainly in January, and it would have a classroom observation scheduled with you of time we could come and be able to observe your class or you in action as well. All with the goal of having all these contract teaching positions filled by the end of February. That's fast. I've been part of Westlake Junior High School for a grand total of, I think, like 8 days so far. They've been great 8 days. So I certainly don't yet have all the answers that you might be wanting to ask, but here's a place that you're going to get them as soon as I'm able to share them. We've already got a web page up. It's at westlakestem.org. The Facebook and the Twitter link right from that, but if you follow on those things, you'll be very, very quick to be apprised of any new details that come out. Every little detail that comes out of the facility or processes in hiring and staffing are going to be there as fast as we can share them. A lot of things on questions of scheduling and master schedules of the junior high are very exciting because, even before I was part of this, there was a STEM steering committee that has been going from even before Armstrong got going and continued right after that as we were preparing for our secondary STEM school. Lots of opportunities. That group had to go and visit different schools right here in Utah, around the country, get different ideas of how possible structures could work on that. So a lot of the first questions I'll get are how's my math block going to work compared to this block? And a lot of those just aren't answered yet, but I'd expect a lot of that to be very concrete about in the next 4 weeks because it ties so heavily to registration. And as you know, registration is upon us already. It's as faster than the timeline of applications. It is here. With that, are there questions I can answer with this group? And as you're thinking about that,